I love dialogue. Like, I really like dialogue, as will quickly become clear in this masterclass. And it's something that I look for in a novel. And if the dialogue's good, very good chance I'm going to love that novel. And a lot of it's instinctive, and I've had to think about why I love it so much. And I think it's because so in science fiction and fantasy, we are by definition trying to take ourselves out of the real world, in a sense. I think a lot of people, I think it's correct for a lot of science fiction and fantasy readers, a lot of them are reading this genre because they want a break from reality and they want to escape into other worlds. Okay, maybe not everyone wants that, but I think that's a lot of the appeal to the genre, right? It certainly is for me. But there's a slight contradiction there, which is that readers want to feel real emotions and they want to feel real characters that they can relate to. So there's an inherent contradiction in the genre of science fiction and fantasy, which is that we want to escape and we want to feel like we've gone to another world, but we also want to be connected to our own world in order to feel strong emotions. And the best way for that to happen, in my opinion, is through good dialogue.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 137 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining this week is my co-host, my bestie from the Midwestie, the queen of my days, my dear Greta Kelly. How you doing, Greta?
Hello.
Hello.
Nice to be back.
Welcome back. And if you want to support Greta, this lovely human being, you can go pick up The Queen of Days, which is a heist story full of chaos gremlins who aren't actually gremlins, but Greta calls them gremlins, so it's a little bit confusing.
They're gremlins,
but,
that's fine.
Yeah, but in spirit. They're gremlins.
And if you want to support Adrian, of course, go pick up this beautiful blue baby, Mushroom Blues. It's your fungal punk noir. It's the mystery you never knew you needed. Sorry, my words suddenly stopped working. Wow.
I'm going to put that on my Amazon page. The mystery you never need. And if you want to support MJ or other co-hosts, you can go pick up her books Among Thieves and the sequel Thick Ass Thieves. If you want another heist fix, we're all about heists, so I got to write a heist novel because I'm out of the loop.
Come on, Adrian. You're going to get kicked out if you don't write a heist book next.
Don't even dare. I started this podcast. Been on for 2 episodes and you're already threatening my rule.
Oh no.
Oh no. Oh my God. As well, for our listeners and viewers, if you want to support the show, you can check out our Patreon or merch store. So check the links in the descriptions to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now joining us once again is the illustrious Ed Crocker, debut author of Lightfall, which is out today. Go get a copy. Welcome back, Ed. How you doing, bud?
I'm very good. The illustrious. That's good. What
I saw you flinch when you said illustrious. Like you just couldn't accept a compliment.
Yeah. I'm going to screen cap that flinch.
It's like an instinctive reaction. Well, we talked about this last time, but yeah, you just hurt a British person there.
It's a compliment is my kryptonite.
Yeah. Well, there's a thing in Britain. Every time you what is it? Every time like you swear, a fairy dies. Is that a thing? I've
never heard that.
I've never heard that.
I've killed so many fairies. Oh my God.
I think it's swearing. All the British viewers are like, no, it's not swearing, it's something else. And then if you clap your hands, you bring them back to life. So every time you compliment a British person, a fairy dies, and you have to clap your hands to bring them back to life. So yeah, there you go. That was a torch analogy I was going.
Get crocked.
Get crocked.
All right.
Nice.
Well, this is part 2 of our 2-part chat with Ed. I'm not going to compliment him anymore because I don't feel like clapping. So I recommend checking out part 1 to get to know him better. Today, though, we're going to get chatty as fuck as we talk about great dialogue.
Okay.
Before we dig deeper into the episode, a quick word from our sponsor. Welcome to Transference, where death and sickness are but a distant memory. Nicholas Five Boroughs is a sicko, someone that takes on others' illnesses. In a city where diseases can be transferred, the rich buy longer lives without pain, and the poor get a short life of constant sickness. Brought back from the brink of death by his friend Brian Meadowhearth, or maybe the invisible hand of an outside actor, Nick finally gets the chance to try and change things, to finally stop the whole disease transfer network. Tensions escalate as Nick infiltrates a higher society he doesn't understand, and starts to fall for Dorothy Sungate, the very person he needs to manipulate to be successful. And between run-ins with a talking cat, genetically modified humans, and a robotic police force, the world around him just keeps getting stranger. Can Nicholas tear down the disease transfer architecture? And how much of his humanity is he willing to bargain along the way? A dystopian vision of healthcare and a market economy, Transference will appeal to fans of Red Rising, Blade Runner, and the BioShock franchise. Soon to be a complete duology with the release of Transcendence in the summer of 2025. Transference by Ian Patterson is available now in paperback and ebook. Get your copy today. And now, enjoy the rest of this episode of SFF Addicts. To get this started, for you personally, why is dialogue something that interests you when it comes to fiction?
Can we first talk about the elephant in the room, which is the fact that we're doing a masterclass, which is just insanely ridiculous because I'm not a master. I'm some gremlin who's not even had this first book out. So I don't want anyone watching
man.
to be like, oh, we had...
Caveat to anyone out there watching, don't treat our masterclasses like some big pedestal,
Yeah.
This isn't masterclass where you can...
For the moment, it's like a novice class, okay? It's like,
right.
Yeah.
Can we call it a midway class?
An editor, so you're not a novice. You also critique people for a living.
There
so
you go.
You are perfectly equipped to lead this masterclass.
That's a good point. Yeah, I have worked with Sunday Times best-selling authors and award-winning indie authors. So,
there you go.
Oh god, that felt horrible complimenting myself. Oh,
clap, Greta, clap. All right, tell us why you like dialogue.
So dialogue. I love dialogue. I really like dialogue, as will quickly become clear in this masterclass. And it's something that I look for in a novel. And if the dialogue's good, very good chance I'm going to love that novel. And a lot of it's instinctive, and I've had to think about why I love it so much. And I think it's because, so in science fiction and fantasy, we are by definition trying to take ourselves out of the real world. In a sense, I think a lot of people, I think it's correct for a lot of science fiction and fantasy readers, a lot of them are reading this genre because they want a break from reality and they want to escape into other worlds. Okay, maybe not everyone wants that, but I think that's a lot of the appeal to the genre, right? It certainly is for me. But there's a slight contradiction there, which is that readers want to feel real emotions and they want to feel real characters that they can relate to. So there's an inherent contradiction in the genre of science fiction and fantasy, which is that we want to escape and we want to feel like we've gone to another world, but we also want to be connected to our own world in order to feel strong emotions. And the best way for that to happen, in my opinion, is through good dialogue. Because if you're reading a narrator, that can be awesome. That can just be really intense and immersive. I'm not saying it can't be, but ultimately, as soon as a character starts talking, you are there in the room. You are there in the room, and you are back to reality. And it's a sort of it's almost I guess it's like an inherent contradiction where it's you don't want to be in reality, but you need to feel those real feelings. And ultimately, the only way I think you can do that properly is through dialogue, because that's when one character says something to another character which will change their life or break their heart or change a story. And you can have all the clever narrative devices you like, but if the dialogue isn't working, or then ultimately you're not going to feel those emotions as intensely. And obviously there's exceptions. There's some amazing authors who will just have books without dialogue and everything. I'm generalizing obviously, but dialogue for me is where the real meat happens. And that's first reason. And I guess as well, I would say, and this is a bit more personal taste, but there's a rhythm to writing, right? And all writers know this, you guys know this. There's a rhythm to writing when you kind of get into it and it just feels like it's popping off, right? And the same thing happens when you're reading. When you're reading a good book, it feels like you're really into the rhythm. It's like a music piece. Musicians get wild about the rhythm of their music. Readers get wild about the rhythm of their books. And for me, one of the best kind of rhythms, I'm trying not to torch this analogy too much, too late. But one of the best rhythms you can get into is the flow of dialogue, when a character's either doing zippy back and forth or they're having an intense conversation. And in that moment, that is one of the best things in the world, to be reading one of your favorite books and you're in a dialogue scene and the writer's just got the dialogue flowing and the rhythm's going and it just feels amazing. And for some people, it's world building that does it. For me, it's dialogue that does it. But I think for everyone, if you get the dialogue right, for me, you've got the bones of the book right, and you can't really go wrong. You can't really go wrong, I think, in my personal opinion.
I agree.
That's great. Yeah. So speaking of books that you really love or do dialogue really well, whether it's book or TV show or movies, do you have any example of anything that really sticks out to you as like, damn, this was some great dialogue in this?
Yeah. So one of my go-tos for dialogue is always Terry Pratchett, because Terry Pratchett was the master at this. Well, in terms of comic dialogue, he was a master, but also in terms of dialogue that could go from comedy to heart, comedy to intense feelings quite quickly, sometimes within 2 lines of dialogue. And if anyone ever wants to write funny, kind of realistic dialogue of 2 people talking that can also get emotional quickly, just read especially the later Discworld books. Just read Discworld, because he was a master at it. And I was actually going to pull out a quote and then I forgot to write it down. So that's why I'm a novice, not a master. But also, it would have just been me reading stuff out, which is not fun. But just go and read one of his books. Like, he was just a master at it. But he's not the only one. Since his sad passing, and so, that was bizarrely somber. In the years since my hero has gone, there's been so many authors who I think have picked up that kind of dialogue trail. Like, I love fantasy authors that do that kind of zingy back and forth dialogue that can just turn on a dime to emotion. I'm not saying that's the only thing you should read, because sometimes you just want very serious or like noir dialogue, or sometimes you'll have sci-fi authors that kind of don't do much dialogue. But the zingy kind of like banter, sort of like, these are real people talking in a fantasy world, that's what really, I was going to say, turns me on. Don't say that. I may just be going.
Now we know why Ed is an editor. Every book he reads.
Masterclass after dark.
After dark.
Masterclass with Ed. Why do I have no subscribers? Why do I have no friends left? Yeah, no, not turn on. I mean, get me going is what I meant to say. So like, and I mean, I could name dozens, but like David Reich is a good example of this modern fantasy author. He does this kind of like zippy, realistic banter, but can make you cry very quickly. Greta's amazing at this. MJ is amazing at this.
Nicholas Eames for me is like really, really good at that.
Yeah. MJ and Greta both come from that Simon Similar stable, like Nick Eames and all that kind of, just sort of like, they just know how to do the quick banter dialogue. But I'd also throw out like Christopher Buehlman, who you guys have had on the show, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Black Time Thief, Daughter's War.
That. Yeah.
Yeah.
He'll come up later again, actually, because Black Time Thief was one of my favorite books of recent times. Adrian's looking for it right now.
I've got it down here somewhere.
I have it back there too.
I've got it.
So
like,
good.
I'm like, where's the yellow? Where's the yellow?
Where's the yellow one?
And what he does, and I don't know how he does it. It's if you want to read some of the best. Oh, he's got it. Oh, you got the yellow one. That's so cool. I've got the British one. Oh, that's very cool. If you want to read dialogue that's not just like funny and humor and heart at the same time, although it's stunningly funny and it's stunningly devastatingly heartbreaking all at the same time, sometimes within the same page. But the linguistic play within the dialogue, it's like every page is like a meal. And it got to the point when I was reading this book where halfway through I was like, I'm going to take this page by page because I want to make this last for like a week. And if anyone comes to me and says, how do you do dialogue? I just say, go read The Blackton Thief. After, obviously, Greta and MJ and David Wright and Terry Pratchett. And I could name dozens of other authors, but there's a bunch of modern fantasy authors, and Richard Swan's actually really good at this as well. There's a bunch of modern fantasy authors, and they just get dialogue, and it's so good to see. Oh, Robin Hobb as well, I'd say, because what she does, she doesn't do the zinging back and forth, obviously, but she does this thing, and we might talk about this later, so I'll skip over this, but she does this thing where she'll just reveal an entirely new character trait to a character that you had no idea existed, and in a few lines they'll just say something to someone and it will just break your heart and you'll just go off sobbing, and she'll do it in like the space of like 2 lines and it will just destroy your week. So that's a separate skill, which I'm kind of into, the Hobb heartbreaker.
Yeah. Ed once again.
That's good.
Oh, he's into it. He's into
it.
Something that you mentioned, we'll get into different elements of like key factors that can make dialogue stand out as we go along. But there's something that you mentioned about sci-fi authors, how there are some sci-fi authors who are a bit more sparse with their dialogue.
Yes.
And that could be in relation to the fact that a lot of sci-fi, especially if it's hard sci-fi, can be very dense in terms of its information and its exposition and its world building and that kind of stuff. And every author does it differently, but sometimes it is to the detriment of the characters and the things that make me personally connect with a story, which is the character and therefore their dialogue. But when it comes to world building and info dumping, I think dialogue is a really effective tool to be able to infuse that information in a much more natural way. So how do you use dialogue to do that kind of world building, that kind of information transference to the reader?
I think that's a good question because, well, let me talk about the sci-fi point quickly first before I get onto that, because I think that's a really interesting thing in sci-fi as opposed to fantasy. There's a lot of sci-fi authors who are into hard sci-fi and they're not interested in dialogue. They don't care. And I'm not shading them. They're just like, they're not here to do that. They're here to put across their crazy hard sci-fi authors. The other day, I was reading an interview with Villeneuve, the director of Dune and Dune 2. Dennis. Is it Dennis or Denise?
No, because he's French-Canadian, so it's Denis.
It's Denis. Okay, thank
Denis.
you. Yeah. Glad I clarified that. So he basically said, I'm not really interested in the dialogue in my films. I think someone criticized him or something, and he was like, I'm that's not what I'm here to do. And that's completely fair because he's here to do this incredible cinematography, these like vibes and this amazing, it's awesome. And is it going to be my favorite film ever? No, because I'm a dialogue man, but like, is it an amazing film? Absolutely. So I think sci-fi is very similar. But then you've got this strain of sci-fi that you've had in the last few years, the Firefly sci-fi, essentially, where you've got, and I guess you could throw like Becky Chambers and people like that in as well. Obviously, Firefly is not a book series, where you've got this kind of more sort of modernist kind of like dialogue's really important because it's about, the characters as well thing. But I think I sometimes struggle to relate to the harder sci-fi because dialogue's so important to me, but I totally respect why they're doing it. And sometimes it's nice to have a break from, nice to have a different genre. But anyway, that was a little diversion because I think that's really interesting how...
Good tangent. Yeah.
Yeah, good tangent. Good tangent, man. Top tangent. So, the question you asked...
I love how
info dump. Yeah,
top tangent. Shit, I forgot.
that was like the height of my chorus, and then he's gone. Boom. I remember now. Info dumping, world building. So I think you're completely right that is really important. How to use dialogue to convey world building and potentially avoid info dumping in the narrative. I also think it's one of the hardest things you can teach. Not teach. I mean, advise. I'm talking to my editor cap here. Advise a debut author, or like an author who's written their first book, I should say, how to do. It's so hard, and like if you're good at doing it, like you're going to be an amazing writer. If you're automatically good at doing it, it's so hard. And the problem is, I agree that it's often better to world build with dialogue, because then you're avoiding, paragraphs of explaining. However, the danger there is that you have characters explaining to another character either things that the character already knows or things that the character doesn't need to know. So the trick is, how can you get...
Or can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
Or things that the character is conveying information about that they shouldn't know.
Oh, they shouldn't know.
That if a character is talking about a certain thing where it's like, I'm a journalist and I'm talking about the functions of a nuclear fission reactor, and just like, how the fuck do you know about that?
Yeah, exactly. Or like they're in their own continent on the world. They've never traveled to the rest of the continent, and you're like, how do I world build the fact that this is a land of 7 continents? Well, they're not going to fucking know that. They've never been on a ship. Like, how are they going to know that? So yeah, that's a third problem. So there's all kinds of ways to get around this. There's a classic sort of naive kind of junior comes to the training camp, whatever, and is explained by the mentor or something. Or there's someone who discovers they have a new power, and then someone who has the power has to explain it to them. So there's a lot of kind of relationships that you can use. But when you're doing that, the key thing is to don't forget that these are people talking, because it's very easy to switch into world building mentality and suddenly the characters become like robots. So it's like 1 minute they're being like, hey, how's it going? Not bad. Oh yeah, did you see that guy? Yeah. I mean, not like that obviously, but like, 1 minute they're like, Greta Kelly, zing, zing, zing. Hey, yeah. Ooh, zing, zing. And then the next, and obviously Greta doesn't do this, but like,
zing, zing.
Oh my god, Greta's the queen of zing, zing, zing.
That's Greta's pew, pew, pew. Pew, 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 zing,
Yeah.
zing,
Zing, zing, zing.
Didn't see that coming. Banter wagon. You've been killed by the Greta wagon. Right, stop it now. So you've got to make sure that you don't suddenly slip into world building talk, and so you've got to remember, even while they're explaining something to another character, they're still going to be doing it in a way that's broken up, in a way that's relatable, in a way that's maybe funny. Maybe the other character will interrupt them. Like, it's not just going to be a here's the explaining bit. Like, it's going to be broken up. Maybe you won't find out the rest till another page. Like, always remember, these are people like you. And so never enter world building talk. And the other thing I'd say is, although you're totally right to say that it's such a good way to get across world building and stuff in dialogue, I think there's a massive fear of just using the narrative just to info dump. And I think people think that you sometimes see authors go, well, I'm not going to do that at all. I'm going to avoid. I've heard that's a problem, and I'm going to just have the characters say it. That's what you're meant to do, and then you get what I've just said. So I think the problem is that if you
it's all about finding that right balance.
Exactly. If you read the best authors, obviously that's subjective, but if you read your favorite authors, what you will see is that sometimes they just info dump, man. They just go for it. They're just like Stephen Aryan, New York Minute. Have you read that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's great, isn't it? And in the first few pages, did I just pronounce his name right? Stephen Aryan.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yes.
You got it.
Yeah. It's like Denis Villeneuve. I don't know why I'm on name watch. Denis Villeneuve nailed it. So in New York Minute, he just info dumps the first 10 pages, and I'm referencing him because it's a book I read fairly recently, and it's brilliant because it's one character and he's on the way to like another bit, so it makes sense, and he's just telling you how the world works, like crazily, but like he's just telling you everything. And because it's so fun, the world, and because it's so interesting, I was like, I want this, Naomi Novik is another incredible one at this. If you ever read the Scholomance trilogy, which is I would say one of the best.
Love those books. They're so good.
They're amazing, aren't they? I would say
Yeah.
it's one of the best fantasy trilogies ever written. She's just a genius. Like, I'll never be as good as her, and that's okay. We worship at her throne. But the first book, Deadly Education, I think, sometimes she'll just stop. And I realize I'm going on a tangent here because I'm actually saying don't do dialogue, but I'll come back to this. She'll just sometimes stop a scene that's getting really good and there's dialogue in a scene, and she'll just stop it, and then she'll just have her, dark, sort of angry narrator. She'll just have her main character just tell you about some fucked up part of this horrible world where, if you've never read it, basically it's just like monsters in the world killing kids all the time. And it's the most phenomenal world building I've ever seen. And it can go on for like 10 pages. She's just relating this horrible things that happens outside this fucked up school or inside the fucked up school. And I've never seen anyone be so bold and do it like that. And I'm not sure if that many people could get away with doing it so much. But she just proves that if you're good, you can do what you want. So I'm not saying do what you want, because we can't all be her. But don't be afraid. Don't feel like you have to put it all into the dialogue. Like, if it's interesting and it's not excessive, and you feel confident, and people have read it and said, yeah, that's not too info dumpy. Like, don't be afraid to get the balance right. Like Adrian said, don't put all the weight on a dialogue, and then you can let the dialogue breathe a bit and do all the fun kind of Greta zing 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 stuff.
And the balance is going to be different for every writer. You're going to figure it out for yourself.
Story.
And for every
Yes.
story too. Yeah.
Yes.
But I'd love to dig deeper onto the character level, because it's something you did really well in Lightfall with all those point of view characters that you had. But everyone, even the side characters, had their own really distinct voices when they were speaking.
Yeah.
As particularly to one another. So how do you find that? How do you find that voice for the characters when you're crafting your own stories?
So I think the easy bit for me is thinking of the voice, and the hard bit is conveying that voice through the dialogue. So when I was writing Lightfall, I knew I wanted to make it a multi-POV book, which is such a dangerous idea, by the way, because like there's so many readers who are like, I'm not shading the readers, this is fair enough, like you like what you like, but a lot of them are like, I was about to put on like an annoying voice, and I was like, don't, Chris, you'll never sell another book. Oh my God. What am I doing? No, this is completely legit if you don't like this. But a lot of them are like, oh, I can't handle 6 POVs. Like, it's just going to drive, especially I'm first person present tense. So a lot of people are like, what the hell are you doing? And I get that. So, but I made that decision because I was like, that's what I want to write. I want to write a vampire, 2 or 3 vampires, a werewolf, and 2 sorcerers. I think 4 vampires, 1 werewolf, 2 sorcerers in the first book, and probably 1 more I've forgotten. And I was like, I want them all to be really different because that's fun. It's a challenge, right? I wanted to make it a little bit hard for myself because I think, by this time I'd written about vampires and werewolves for like 7 years or whatever, if you remember from my last
multiple iterations across multiple years.
Exactly. So I was like, I gotta make this hard for myself, man. So I came up with distinct styles. So for example, my werewolf's quite Germanic and she's quite sort of clipped in the way she speaks. My werewolf assassin Raven Arnsbach, get the little accent on the Germanic thing there. No one's going to know how to pronounce the name, by the way. It's
unless you put a pronunciation guide in the book.
Oh, that's a good idea. It's too late now for the first one, but I should do that in the second one. The second one has even more.
Fucked up, man.
Yeah, I know. So she's really clipped, and then I've got a like a kind of crazy sort of kind of already a fan favorite character. I can't say I've got fans yet, but readers who read it. Alana, who's like this, she just says mad stuff, and she's just kind of will come out with like in my head, she's like Irish. I'm not saying the Irish are mad. I'm just saying like, where I'm going. A bit like Christopher Buehlman. We'll come on to that later. So she just comes out with all the kooky stuff. And then I've got like a posh character who says things in very kind of long formal speak, and he's got a bit of humor to him. He's like a vampire lord. And then we've got a Sherlock Holmes style sorcerer who says all the big fancy words. And then we've got his sort of like slightly alcoholic, jokey sort of Chandler style character who comes out with the one-liners, who's his deputy, and he sort of just says all the kind of like a bit of the kind of Greta zing 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 stuff.
He takes his inside thoughts and makes them outside thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Greta, you put that in such a mom way. Talking to your daughters.
You use your words.
Yeah. Your inside thoughts became outside thoughts.
Gotta dial that back.
Zing, 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 daughter.
Zing zing. He's got no filter, a bit like me. It's terrifying actually the things I don't say. You'd be terrified. So that was the easy part. That was the fun part. And then, and I think this is still part of your question, then the hard part is then how do you write POVs like that, but then also get the dialogue right? And I did it a really weird way. So every time I sat down to write a scene where this person would be in, I'd go back to my character profile, and I'd have 3 words for the character that summed up the character. So, for example, Raven Arnspark was angry, poetic, and sarcastic. And the poetry is not often there, but occasionally she'll be poetic. She's mainly just angry and sarcastic. And then I just say those words to myself, and then as I was writing the dialogue, those kind of separate emotions came through into the dialogue. Now, I'm not sure that's very helpful. I think that's more an indication of how what a cluster maze my brain is, just to kind of like, how
but
weird my brain.
There are other things. Like MJ has a good trick where it's like she'll write a sentence building on like what you've done. It's like you have 3 words, MJ, go get MJ's ultimate SFF story Bible.
Yeah.
Second time's been referenced.
There's basically like a sentence. Oh yeah, Greta's got it.
There you go.
Basically a sentence that is like, this is a sentence that is like a core encapsulation of this character. And then you just repeat that sentence and you can read it to yourself. And what I do actually is like, because I'm really big on accents. So it's like I'll actually read my character sentence in what I imagine that character's voice actually sounds like.
Whoa, that's a good idea.
So that really helps me to basically be like, okay, this is the way that they speak. So you said that you have that like Germanic character. It's like, or an Irish character. It's like you could just repeat that sentence and still in the accent until you really feel like, okay, this character. It's almost like method acting, but
well, it goes back to what you were saying about dialogue having its own cadence and rhythm.
Yep.
If you can speak it out loud and it sounds natural coming off of your tongue, it's going to sound natural in people's brains when they're reading it.
Yes, exactly. Well, that goes back to the idea that even though it's in a fantasy world, it should be. Did we get all?
Sorry, one of my lights died.
That was. Oh yeah, she's back. That was.
Oh, she's got her Brad Pitt interview with the vampire light back on.
Yeah, she's got a special vampire light. That's what it is.
Her vampire light.
It's the secret to my youth.
Just drown it out in heavy light.
So, yeah, it's like a light-based Dorian Gray. That doesn't work.
There you go. There you go.
Well, that goes back to the idea that even though it's a fantasy world, realistic dialogue that you might say with your friends, obviously with a fantasy element, that's what you want. So if like you say, Greta, if you then repeat that to yourself and do your own as if your friends are with you, then when you're writing, it's just going to come naturally. So it's about getting natural with your character, whether you do MJ's thing or 3 words or whatever, and just kind of like feeling the rhythm. It's all a bit kind of like flowery, like it's not very specific, I'm aware, but like that's a problem with dialogue. Like world building, you've got all these rules that you can follow and specific. Dialogue is very much like just kind of getting it. Dialogue's a bit like meditation. Like you just gotta. Oh God, I sound really pretentious. I do like meditation, but you just got to get into it. You got to get into the flow. You just kind of got to get into the zone. You got to.
For me, honestly, it's like I kind of equate it to theater or some any kind of like theatrical vocalization where it's like you're getting into how somebody speaks, so just have some fucking fun with it. Because for me, like dialogue, the way in which dialogue comes across most effectively is if you are enjoying it. Doesn't necessarily means like it has to be funny. It has to be cheerful or whatever. It's like you are enjoying it because contextually it feels right for what these characters are doing and what they're experiencing and how they're feeling and how this emotion is being conveyed.
Yes.
And so if you're enjoying it, for the particular kind of evocativeness that it's trying to put out, then for you as an author, if you're having fun with it, then the reader is more likely to have fun with it too. So be a little bit more playful with it.
Yes.
Read that shit out loud to yourself, and
yes,
if it comes across stilted, it's because it is. Honestly.
Yeah. So don't even. Yeah, it's not work. Just have fun. So the more fun you have, imagine if all life was like that. You just
if
more
only.
fun.
If only.
If only.
But I think a tricky thing as well is like, I mean, just like I'm a rare case because it's like I'll read the dialogue out to myself in different voices, especially when different characters are interacting with each other. And so if anyone walked into the room, they'd be like, "You're like batshit," in which case I would say, "Yes, I am," because I'm an author. So what? But how do you approach dialogue between different characters? So it's like you establish a character's voice, you establish a character's sort of cadence and rhythm and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then you mash them together.
Yeah.
And how do you sort of manage what this character is like on an individual level versus how they are in an interaction with a different character?
Yeah. So what I do and what I think is really important is you have to think of, I'm going to try and explain this in a way that doesn't sound a bit mad. You have to think of all your character relationships like there's arrows connecting them. And you have to think about how one character is like when they're talking to another character. And the simplest way to imagine your group of friends. Imagine the Adrian crew or the Greta Zing 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 crew, whatever. Like,
it's very egotistical. It's not my crew.
In a group, you'll have one vibe, but then if you take pairs of those friends out and put them together, just themselves, they'll have a very specific way that they interact. So if you have whatever 5 or 6 main characters, they'll have all the personality traits that I just said that are reflected in dialogue. It's like Raven Arnsbach, my German werewolf. She's very poetic, she's very sarcastic, she's very angry, and in dialogue that's reflected in various different ways. But then she'll also have different relationships with each character, and that relationship will inform how they speak when they're having dialogue. So I'll give you an example. So I have like a sort of fun kind of alcoholic kind of jokey guy we were talking about before, that you say your internal thoughts outside, and he has a kind of ongoing banter thing with Raven Arnsbach, the sort of angry werewolf I was just talking about. So when they're talking, so she kind of thinks he's a bit ridiculous, and he's sort of slightly attracted to her, but also a bit scared of her because she's fucking terrifying. And so they have a kind of thing where he's like jokey, flirty, also very scared, and she's like, "You are a ridiculous person. Like, I could just eat you right now. Like, I mean, literally, not like sexually." So.
But that's the double entendre.
Yeah,
that's the magic of it.
There you go. Thank you. So whenever they're talking, and it's sometimes within the scene where other people are talking, so it can get complicated. So that's why you have to kind of like make notes or practice it. They will just have like a couple of lines where they just sort of have that banter. She's hating on him, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll take that hate." And there's another character where there's like, if you have romantic characters that are romantically inclined, so my Sherlock Holmes characters kind of have this sort of tentative, flirty thing with my vampire palace maid, Sam, my kind of main character. And so whenever they kind of talk to each other, slowly throughout the books, I do horrendous slow burn romances that take like 3 books to bear fruit. They'll
and even then they're only going to graze fingers. Greta's going to
just gently look at each other.
Ooh, just a little knuckle graze.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds horrible.
We'll take a pause for dramatic effect.
Oh, you can't leave that in.
I definitely am. I don't edit this shit.
Yeah, that could mean something very different. Anyway, moving swiftly on. So yeah, they'll have like this sort of so whenever they're talking, they will have he's normally like quite sort of Sherlock Holmesy, but he'll suddenly become flirty when he's talking to her. So each of these characters have their own different one-on-one relationship, and then and that can affect their dialogue because they may move away from their general dialogue into a slightly new territory. And if you want to avoid being confused, and if you want to, especially, we might come to this with kind of bigger crowd scenes where you've got 5 or 6 people talking at the same time, you want it in your head, you want to have such a good idea of exactly what their one-on-one relationship is and boil it down to something simple, a bit like we were just talking about with individual characters, remembering how they speak, boil it down to like a sentence or whatever, or 3 words, boil down their relationship, whether it's like banter, hate, or like, flirty, cautious, whatever, and then make sure you know exactly how every single character is gonna talk to every other character. And what that will do is that will keep a consistent tone of character, and it will enhance the emotions, so that when you get the eventual emotional payoff of like one character having this emotional breakthrough with another character, it will feel incredible because you've been building up this kind of mini story with these characters through dialogue. So it's almost like an alternate way of doing normal dialogue, because you've got your character personality, and then you've got this whole other system of like little interpersonal relationships, if that doesn't sound too
And
mental.
that kind of works in like a crowd management sort of way too.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you've been talking kind of like one-on-one, but when you expand that to a group of people that are all in the same room making a plan to do the thing, like how do you keep all those voices distinct?
Yeah, so partly, again, that's relevant to what I just said, because what you want to avoid in a crowd situation is you want to avoid one person saying something and then another person suddenly just turn to that person and like info dumping or just saying what you need to get through this complex scene, but in a way that they don't normally talk to each other. Because you can always tell that the writer's being like, oh, I've got to get through this important scene where there's a bunch of people. This is a bit of a pain. So that helps to keep that distinct. But my method for crowd scenes, and this might only work for me, I don't know if this is just me being mad, but I have tried to explain it to authors I work with as well, so they're very polite. I don't know if it's ever helped them, but I call it the Crocker roll method, which is a very arrogant way of naming something that I'm sure many thousands of people have worked out before me. In fact, I know they have, because I steal it from a lot of TV shows. So the Crocker roll method is the problem with crowd scenes where you've got to write a scene, and you get it a lot in fantasy or sci-fi, where you've got 5 or 6, let's say 5 people in a room, and they've all got to convey some information. Something's happening. Maybe it's before a big battle and you've got everyone in the king's chambers or queen's chambers, or maybe it's like, you're all on a spaceship and you're all on the what do you call the spaceship? The cockpit. Is that the bridge? The bridge.
Yeah, the
Yes,
bridge.
The
Yeah.
bridge.
I promise I remember. The bridge, yeah. So what I do, just not as much as fantasy. So whenever you've got a scene where they're all in, what you sometimes get is a kind of like, it's all a bit confusing. The character personalities stop in order just to get through the dialogue, because something has to be done before the action starts, and it gets confusing or it gets a bit bland, and it's a missed opportunity to go back to what you were saying before, Adrian, about theatre. It's a missed opportunity to almost create an immersive mini theatre experience. And the way to do it in the Crocker roll method, trademarked, is that you assign everyone a role, and their dialogue reflects that role. And that way, it stops being like a clusterfuck of a scene and starts being like this cool scene where you can play off different characters. So, for example, and this is generalization, obviously, you can mix this up, but you can have let's say you have 5 people talking, and which is, if it gets more than that, scenes often get a bit weird. But let's say you have 5 people talking. You've got your main character or your main-ish character, whatever, main protagonist, who's going to be the protagonist in that scene. So they're trying to convey a point. They're trying to be like, guys, we need to do this strategy in a battle or whatever. You've always got some kind of antagonist who's always going to be like either actively arguing against them, or if they're all friends, maybe just kind of like trying to ask some questions or point out stuff. It doesn't have to be like aggressive.
Just being like contrarian.
Yeah, being contrarian. Yeah. You almost always need a contrarian in the scene. And they're probably going to talk the most. And then alongside that, you kind of often have a supporting character who's going to be like probably agreeing with the main character or sort of, helping them out, whatever, or contributing to what they have to say. Again, generalization. So you got these three, and they're probably going to talk the most. And then what about the fourth and fifth ones? Are they just going to be like occasionally say something boring? Are you going to forget they're there? No. The fourth one is often the Joker character. You see this in a lot of books where it's a crowd scene and the protagonist, antagonist, supporting character are talking, and then the Joker comes in every now and again. He just says something funny, and the reader goes, "Ha ha ha! That was a nice bit of joke," so I can get back to the important stuff. Yeah, I do this repeatedly in my scenes, for better or worse. And then you've got your final character who. It's often quite annoying because you forget. There's always one guy and you forget, and oh god, they didn't speak. What were they doing? Just getting a coffee or something? What were they doing? So make them not speak. That's fine. Make them mysterious. Make them really forget they're there, and then right at the end of the scene, just say something like, "Have you forgotten about the darkness?" or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Who like this is like a perfect. If anyone's played Mass Effect, that character was always Garrus. Yes. So it's like this character named Garrus who's he's always leaning in the background. He's just like leaning against a wall because he fucking leaned more than Fat Joe. Yeah. And he would always come in with you would see their perspective. And this is another thing that really bothers me about group scenes is often they forget about the actual place where it's taking place. Yes. So you can use the space to convey information as well. The contrarian character slams their fist on a table or punches a wall. Yeah. You can do things like that. But that character who's kind of mysterious would be like Garrus leaning against a wall and he hasn't said anything. It's like, what the fuck is he thinking? Yeah. And it actually gets you thinking about what he's thinking. Exactly. And then when they do drop that one-liner, and often in Garrus's case, it was very intelligent and well thought out. Yeah. And it's just like a mic drop kind of moment where it's just like, boom, here's one line. He didn't need to say anything more than that, but his body language spoke volumes in the lead up to that.
His reactions were.
You could tell they really liked him in Mass Effect because he just kept doing it. Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And going back to what you're saying about space, that's the other thing. So once you've worked out these 5 roles, and you can play around with the roles, obviously. But once you've got your protagonist, your antagonist, supporting character, your Joker, and then mysterious guys. Think about, like you just said, imagine they're in the scene and imagine where they're standing. Not everyone's a visual thinker. In fact, what's a thing I learned the other year where some people can't picture an actual apple. Some people just picture a drawing of an apple because they're not fully visual thinkers. Have you ever seen that?
Yep. Yeah. It's I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's they visualize in the abstract as opposed to the actual specific thing.
Yeah. So they'll be really awesome at some other kind of forming of visuals, whatever, but they just can't imagine a proper apple, Whereas I think in pure visualization. So I'm constantly imagining, that's why I spend all my time in video games because I think I'm there and it's awesome. So if you can do that, then just imagine where they're standing. It's almost like a theatre piece. So imagine where your protagonist is standing next to a table or whatever. Your antagonist is facing opposite them. There may be supporting characters sitting in a chair just offering some support. There may be the Joker's kind of pacing, having a drink and just up and down. Maybe he keeps going to the bar and back while they're talking because he's a bit of an alcoholic, like you'll always get in my books. And then the mysterious Garrus character, maybe he's just like you say, leaning against the wall on the far side of the chamber or whatever. And if you can imagine that in your head, like it's a TV show, then suddenly it stops being a confusing scene and it starts being I know exactly where everyone is. I know exactly what mood everyone is in. And then you'll find that you don't miss anyone out. It's not confusing. And all the dialogue's kind of very zippy and back and forth. And I got that from, one of the ways it helped me think about that was not books, but was TV shows. Because you see this pattern over and over again in TV shows. So a great example is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which taught me a lot about dialogue. My dialogue constantly trying to reflect the awesomeness of Buffy. Which is sad because the older I get, like the less people have seen Buffy. Like all the Gen Z kids, some of them are like, "What's Buffy?"
Oh,
And
it's
I'm
so
like,
fucking good though, man.
it's so good.
They'll find it eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It'll be cool. Like right now we're going through a resurgence of like stuff that was in the 90s is coming back.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go through the 2000s.
Yeah.
And like Buffy was kind of like transcending 90s, 2000s. So it'll get there. It'll get there.
It'll get there. Yeah. One day Buffy will just be like Friends. It'll just be on all.
I hope so. And they have a Buffy reunion episode. That would be amazing.
Oh my God. I would die.
Yes,
I'd actually die. I'd literally die. But in Buffy, you have Buffy's. I'm sorry if you haven't seen Buffy. Basically, Buffy's a vampire slayer. Obviously, she's in high school at the start, and so she's a protagonist. So in a scene, she's always like, you got the main dialogue. Then you've got like Giles, the librarian, who's always like trying to say, "Don't do that." A mentor character. Don't do that crazy thing, Buffy. You need to read some books first, or whatever. And then you've always got like a supporting character, let's say Willow, her friend or something. And then you've got Xander, who's like the jokey character who will speak less but keep coming in with the funny quips. And then you'll have someone like Angel, who was like a vampire who had his soul back, who is kind of gets together with her. No spoilers. And he'd be like the mysterious guy. It's like, why the fuck is he still? And he'd just be like in the background going, "Oh,
he's just like always there, like brooding."
Just there to brood.
Just often there in the background brooding.
When you rewatch Buffy season 1, like what you realize is like he's this, and we may come back to this about vampires. Oh no, we won't. That was like, anyway, forget that. No, I forgot to bitch about vampires. Anyway, he's this old guy, and he's just hanging around like all her school environments for like the whole season. And she's like, "Who's this guy?" And he just keeps popping up.
It's like Matthew McConaughey in Dazed and Confused. He's just hanging. Every year I get older, but they stay the same age. Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
All right.
All right.
Yeah. So you'll get Angel, and you'll see that pattern just repeated over and over again. And Friends, I guess, is kind of like that a little bit, although they interchange a bit more because they're meant to be all kind of equal, all 6 of them. But you'll often get, let's say, you'll get Ross, Rachel, and Monica, for example, who are doing the kind of main sort of protagonist, antagonist, supporting things, kind of the main dialogue. Chandler's coming in with if they're all in the room together, Chandler's coming in with a funny Chandler, a da-da-da, da-da-da, the same exact thing he always said. And then I went, it's exactly the same.
His intonation,
Monica, are you da-da-da-da-da-da? I mean, I love Chandler. He was very me. Anyway, but he's a joker, and then you'll have like it's often Phoebe or like Joey taking turns as being like the kind of like who says less but then says something daft at the end or something like that. So by necessity, you will see this pattern repeated, especially in TV shows. And if you can repeat that pattern in books, then you're more likely to avoid the classic bunch of characters. I don't know who's speaking. The author doesn't know. Who cares? Let's just get to the battle.
Yeah, but another important factor in that is like, okay, so we've got the characters and we've got their roles. We've got the environment and sort of like ambient clues as to like who's where, what's going on. But then also you have like the mechanics of speech tags and how the use of speech tags and actions can enhance everything and also not just like enhance the effectiveness of everything, but also clarify and rid the scene of further confusion. It's like you can use dialogue tags, you can use action tags to help sort of like you were talking about last episode, like make that scene as lean as possible.
Yes. And this is one of the things. So going back to my day job as an editor, there's different types of editing. There's story-based editing called developmental editing. There's line editing. Sometimes people gloss over copy editing, but I call it line editing, where you're trying to make sentences better. You're not correcting errors. You're trying to make sentences better. And one of the things that I do most in my editing with authors, especially like authors in early stages, is I work on how to make dialogue better by the use of speech tags or dialogue tags and action tags. So speech tag, a dialogue tag will be like, I'm having a great time talking to Ed, Greta said happily.
Greta, zip, zip, zip.
Zing, zing, zing. That was the most anti-zing, zing, zing comment ever. The most boring comment. I'm going to get some banter, Greta said happily. I'm a writer, honestly. And then an action tag would be like Greta said happily, walking over. She then walked over to the bookcase to bang her head on a book because she was so tired of this conversation. And two sides of Greta there.
We do not condone Greta's self-harm or anyone's self-harm.
Yeah. Very gently, very gently. So one of the things I say to writers is that be careful with speech tags and action tags, because dialogue lives or dies in the way that you use speech tags or dialogue tags and action tags. Because I have some golden rules, and I'll come to those in a second, but basically, essentially, it comes down to the headline. If you use them too much, and you use them in the incorrect or inadvisable way, then it will confuse and drown out your dialogue, and it will ruin everything you're trying to say, and it will make it confusing. It will make it an effort for the reader to get through the dialogue. And often you'll think you're doing like God's work. You'll think you're being like, I need to put in this speech tag. I need to put in this action tag. This is how you need to write. And a lot of the time you don't. You need you need that dialogue to flow. So can I say Crocker's 5 golden rules?
List them off. Yeah.
Why do I have to call everything like Crocker's something? Why is that?
How many have you trademarked? Yeah. Yeah.
Is that narcissism, or is it like, am I secretly self-deprecating myself? I think let's go with the second one.
Combination of both.
Combination, yeah. The best combination, yeah.
Self-deprecation and narcissism is the best combination.
Honestly, I think that's a new thing, because being a narcissist is toxic, and we all agree on that, and that's good. I'm glad we all avoid narcissists. But I think self-deprecating narcissism, I think that's the way forward.
It's just humble brags all the way down.
Yeah. Let's do it. All the way down to our doom.
All the way down. All right, golden rules.
Golden rules. So the first golden rule is if you can avoid using a speech tag, Greta said happily, whatever, avoid using the speech tag. So in some of the best bits of dialogue you'll see in a book, it will be like there's two people, we know who's talking. You put in a speech tag at the start, so you know that person said that. Then someone replies, put in a speech tag, and then for the next 4 or 5 lines, readers understand that conversations with two people back and forth. You don't need to keep putting a speech tag. Have a bit of zing, zing, zip, zip, zip. Get a bit of Greta Kelly on the go. And that's how you create entertaining back and forth dialogue. But then the counter to that, the second rule is that if you have more people, or your lines go on a bit longer than necessary, so let's say you've got a whole page of this, at some point you're going to need to bring back those tags. And it can just simply be a speech tag. So you've had 4 or 5 back and forths, and then someone maybe says, maybe you want to add in an adverb. I'll come to adverbs in a second, but let's say for the sake of argument, she said angrily to show that now she's angry. And that makes sure that everyone's kind of relocated in the dialogue. So you want a bit of zip, but you don't want too much zip. And if there's more than 2 people, then you can try and get a bit of zip. So you can try and take out speech tags if there's a little bit where 2 people are talking together. But as soon as someone else comes in, you got to make sure that tag's there. And then as soon as the other person comes in, so you got to read it back when you're editing and being like, does the reader know who everyone is? So the first 2 rules are about balancing, you want as few tags as possible, but you need them for clarity, I would argue. And then the third bit is words like adverbs, particularly adverbs, can be the death of dialogue, because, well, not the death, that's a bit dramatic, but they can slow things down. So let's say, I'm having the time of my life talking to Ed, said Adrian enthusiastically. And then I immediately come back and saying, well, no, Adrian, you're just being nice to me. Why am I making this so meta? What is going on?
You're even self-deprecating in your made-up dialogue.
It's that's 2 layers of meta. Man, my poor therapist. So adverbs I think you should almost never use adverbs with dialogue, because if you're using an adverb, it shows that you've not shown the emotion of the character within what they're actually saying. So if you have to say angrily, then why is that not clear from their dialogue that they're angry? Sometimes you need to say it. Sometimes it's not clear. I get that. Okay, you should never do prescriptive rules. Okay, never use adverbs. That'll get that's wrong. I agree. That's wrong. But they should be used sparingly, because they can bring they can take away the zipper dialogue, they can be redundant, they can add things, and most of the time they should not be there, unless they're adding something that you don't get from the dialogue. The fourth golden rule is, he says, try to remember the fourth golden rule. Fourth golden rule is, can I look at my sheet and
You can do it.
this is bringing me down to earth now. You think he's got everything memorized, but he doesn't. Fourth golden rule. Yeah, cool. Okay, no, keep that in. Let's be honest. We should be real. Let's keep that.
This is an honest show. It's therapy.
It's therapy. It's an honest show. So don't always use speech tags. Like, another way to make dialogue zip, zip, zing, 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 is, we've evolved from zip, 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 is to take off speech tags or dialogues and just use an action tag. What do I mean by that? Instead of I've never laughed so much in my life in this interview, said Greta enthusiastically, as she walked over to the bookcase for another head thumping session. Take off, as long as we know that Greta's been talking in the previous Greta line, take away the speech tag. Just say, like, I've forgotten what I said now, but I've never, this is the most I've ever laughed in my life. Full stop. Greta then walked over to the bookshelf and started, headbutting the books. So, like,
as one does.
So we already know that Greta's talking. Like, you don't need a speech tag. A lot of writers are like, oh, gotta go put it. No, just throw in the action tag, man. Just take it out, and that improves the flow. And then the final one, and sometimes writers, when I'm editing, already instinctively know this. Sometimes they never do it, and I have to leave constant comments, which is fine, by the way, because that's the whole point of an editor. That's not shading anyone. Try not to put the speech tag at the end of a long bit of dialogue if you can, unless it's vital information that can only come at the end. So what I mean by that is, let's say I've been drinking a couple of glasses of wine. I hope it's not affected my performance on this amazing podcast, but I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I look ridiculous. Ed said, swirling his wine glass enthusiastically, right? Now, the problem with that is I gave quite a bit of dialogue, and then it's only at the end you discover that A, it's me talking, and B, I'm swirling my wine glass. Now, that could have been useful information to know nearer the start, because then as you're seeing me talk, you're imagining me swirling my wine glass, which is crucial information to suggest that, maybe he's had too much wine. I've not. I'm just,
He's getting into villain mode.
Yes, thank you. Villain mode. So how would that look if you swap that around? Where you'd say, I forgot what I said now, of course, but I'm really enjoying this wine. Ed said, swirling his wine glass enthusiastically. And hopefully I've not had too much, but I guess, I don't know, that will be up to the audience to decide. Then you get that information earlier. And almost all the time you should be doing that when you're introducing an action tag, unless the action tag can only happen once the person's finished talking. Like, the person finishes talking and then they walk over to the bookcase to headbutt the books. So obviously that's a consequential thing. But if it's something they're doing while they're doing it, tell the reader immediately so they can have it in their mind as they're doing it.
And that is actually a really effective thing, because on surface level, it seems like it might interrupt the dialogue.
Yes.
But what it actually does is it enhances the dialogue and it improves the flow of the dialogue. Because not only are you imagining what they look like when they're saying this thing, but you're also getting that augmented version where you have the action that is combining with that for the rest of that dialogue. And those two things work.
Yeah, indicating what's going on inside that they're not necessarily saying outside.
Exactly.
Yes. And what you have to remember is that readers are visualizing the conversation as it's happening. So it's not an interruption, because they're playing it out in their head. So as they read it, because the brain works so quickly when you read, that as you read it, the brain is correcting the scene as it's going. So they don't see it as an interruption. They just see it as the brain just immediately receives it as an extra bit of information. So yeah, never be afraid to kind of go straight in with the action tag and then just have all the dialogue you want. And I think that's 5. Yeah, that's my 5 golden rules. Yeah, there you go.
That's awesome. You've already given so much great advice, but now that we're kind of getting ready to close out on this masterclass, do you have any like final nuggets of advice that you can give regarding dialogue?
So I'm going to give a proper bit of advice and then a contradictory bit of advice, because I often like to
because you're both the protagonist and the contrarian.
Exactly. I'm combined. Yeah, you know, I have many personalities in my head, and often I like to say things that completely ruin everything I've said. I quite like doing that. So I'll give the serious bit of advice first. So, well, they're both serious. You know what I mean? The biggest thing I can say with dialogue is that, and it kind of goes back to what we've already said, that the point of dialogue is to convey a character's emotions in a way that will make the experience more immersive. So whenever you're writing dialogue, you should be always thinking, is this making a reader feel like these are real people, they are in the scene, and is it contributing to the way you feel about the emotions of the characters, which means that when a character gets to the end of their character arc, it feels real, it feels earned. You know, you can't tell the reader that the character's going to, well, you can to a certain extent through narration, but you can't really tell the reader the character's going to have this. They have to experience it. And dialogue is what turns speculative fiction, especially science fiction fantasy, from something that's completely unreal, which we kind of want to a certain extent. It turns it from unreality into something that can be so intense that it can make you cry, or it can make you want to tell thousands of people about it. And ultimately, you need to be thinking of your own strategies with dialogue to make you feel that. And if you can do that, then it's great if you have good world building. It's great if you have a good plot. It's great if you have good character arcs. It's great if you have a good pace. It's great if you have good structure. But if you can get that dialogue, creating those emotions and making the reader feel immersed, then you can turn a brilliant book into like a truly like phenomenal book that people will talk about, you know, for ages. And yeah, so that would be my serious bit of advice. And now to contradict it all, if you hate dialogue, not hate, but like sometimes dialogue might not be your thing, right? We've not only chatted about human dialogue, but sometimes like you're like, I just don't want to do that much humor in my dialogue. I don't want to do too much zing. I'm more interested in the plot and the world building, and I want my dialogue to be good. Obviously, no one wants rubbish dialogue, but like I'm not going to expend all this effort into it. If it's making you miserable trying to make this dialogue amazing, then you can have books where the dialogue's like okay but not amazing, in the same way in fantasy that you can have books where the prose, like there's some very famous fantasy authors who by their own admission know their prose isn't amazing, and it doesn't matter to their fans because their world building is out of this world and the characters are just like people obsess over. And you know, you can swap that around with other elements. I would say my world building is quite weak, and some readers have been very nice and said actually they think it's very good. I personally think it's quite weak. I think my dialogue is very good. I think, you know, my zing 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 is quite good. You know, I think my characters are good. And I'm okay with that because I like doing world building, but I'm not like a crazy, it's my massive thing, if that makes sense, which is a stupid thing to confess if you're a fantasy author. But like my thing is people talking in rooms, having a bit of fun, and then ultimately getting so emotional that the reader cries. That's my thing. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Okay. And if you're the opposite and your world building gets you out of bed in the morning, then like, that's okay. You're never going to be amazing at dialogue. Like that doesn't matter. Okay. You can build you can build amazing books based on that. So if everything we've said has fallen flat and you're just like, I want to make it okay, then just hire a good editor and like, don't slap yourself too hard, metaphorically.
Because there's never going to be a perfect balance between everything. You know,
exactly.
There are going to be some elements of your book that are weaker than others, and that's what writing more books fixes. You get better at those things that you're not as good at. So
exactly.
So just accept that your dialogue is okay, and
have a
and
couple
get better.
glasses of
Write
wine,
more.
accept your fault, you know.
Yeah.
Get over it. It's fine.
It's like when you come out
Fucking get over it.
Fucking get over it. It's like when you
Just
come
hit
out.
your head with some books for a while. It's fine. It all goes away.
It's like when you come out of a relationship and your partner who's like broken up with you has said, you know, you have this massive flaw, and you're like, I'm never going to get over that flaw. It's fine. Get over it. You know, it's fine. I'm going to be, you know, I'm not a bad person. I just have a flaw.
Exactly. We're all flawed people. Welcome to 2025. It's a good time.
Wow, starting off the year really
Started off strong.
optimistic.
Yeah, New Year's resolutions.
Why do we end on such a downer?
No.
This is like the most depressing. This is the end of your show. God. This is it. People will be like, I'm not subscribing to this. I feel terrible.
No, it's because we're having a good time and we're being self-deprecating.
We are.
Because Ed's with us. So have fun with it. And that's it for this mini masterclass with Ed. Thank you so much for doing this two-parter with us, for having this wonderful, informative dialogue with us. We really appreciate you offering to do this particular topic.
Can I just say, like, I'm very bad at being serious, but it has genuinely been one of the happiest moments of my year when you guys invited me, because like, I love you guys, and obviously I've watched the show for like a couple of years, whatever. Shout out to MJ. And it's just I don't know whether I perform well, but it's just been so much fun and it's so cool. So thanks for making a really nice moment of my year.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah,
it's very sweet.
We love to
see. We are ending on a really nice note. It's all sentimental now.
I put it back.
Yeah, everyone just like cry, just have those tears.
Can you feel the?
Just have these tears, people.
Can you feel the love?
Oh my god. As well, if anyone contributes $5 or more to our Patreon, they can check out an exclusive reading by Ed from Lightfall, which is out today. So go get yourselves a copy. Support this wonderful human being and his debut novel. Ed, where can folks find you online?
Yeah, Greta's got my book. I don't know where I put my book. It's gone. It's fine.
You had 3, and they're gone.
Yeah, I had 3, and now they're all gone. I'm on Blue Sky, Insta, and TikTok. Where I do quite a lot of stuff for my sins. Ed Crocker books, all 3. And I'm not on Twitter anymore, sadly. Not sadly. I'd love to encourage people to sign up to my newsletter. You can do that on my website, www.ed-crocker.com, or link in bio on my socials. It's called Get Cropped. The first one will have been out when we're talking. I'm putting a lot of effort into exclusive short stories, SFF news roundup, giveaways, lots of silly stuff. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to do some fun stuff. And I think that's it. Just, and if you don't like me, just, that's cool.
Get cropped.
Get cropped.
Get cropped, yeah. If you don't like me, get cropped. Fuck off.
Fuck off. You can also follow SFF Addicts on all the platforms at SFF Addicts Pod. You can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go check out Mushroom Blues if you want a little dose of fungal noir. Greta, what about you?
Really good.
I'm mostly on Instagram and TikTok these days at Greta K. Kelly. So come find me, talk books and D&D with me. I'm always down for that. And if you're interested in some heists and hijinks, come on and check out Queen of Days.
Yeah, support Greta, her kids, support me and my kids, support MJ and her cat, and just support all the authors that you love, and leave reviews and ratings and all that kind of stuff, because that goes a long way.
Yeah.
For the show too.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.